World War II wasn't just a war between armies. It was an age of terror, and one of the most dangerous times ever faced by ordinary people. Across almost the entire world, every nation was racing to overpower the next. And when we talk about Italian warships, we're talking about machines that worked day and night, hunting enemies and tearing through the deep sea. And in today's video, you'll see the deadliest Italian warships used in World War II. Believe it or not, many of them go far beyond what most people expect. Watch until the end to uncover their stories. Now, let's dive into the ocean together. Littorio Well, look at this. Steel stretched into confidence, floating with the kind of authority meant to silence arguments before they start. Littorio entered the water not as a test piece, but as a statement, laid down on 28 October 1934. Launched in August 1937, and finally commissioned on 6 May 1940, when war demanded answers. Built around a steel hull wrapped in heavy belt and deck armor, she embodied Italy's belief that protection mattered as much as firepower. Her job was simple and brutal: dominate the central Mediterranean and keep the Royal Navy thinking twice. Reality arrived in November 1940 at Taranto, where British carrier aircraft tore into her hull and changed how Italy risked its capital ships. Repaired and returned, Littorio later stood behind convoy operations during the Second Battle of Sirte in March 1942, acting as the looming threat that shaped enemy movement. Costs were enormous, often described as hundreds of millions of lire, yet never cleanly documented, fitting for a ship built to intimidate more than explain itself. Vittorio Veneto. Imagine a warship designed less for chasing glory and more for forcing restraint. Vittorio Veneto was that presence, fast, modern, and quietly dangerous. Her keel went down in October 1934. She slid into the sea in July 1937, and by August 1940, she was operational, ready for a war that favored patience over spectacle. Built from massive steel with the most advanced layout Italy could produce, she represented the peak of Italian battleship design. Instead of constant gun duels, Vittorio Veneto lived at the center of the fleet-in-being strategy, sailing just enough to keep British planners nervous. Every sortie mattered, even when shots weren't exchanged, because her existence alone shaped convoy routes and air cover decisions. She covered operations, threatened supply lines, and forced the enemy to plan around her shadow. Precise construction costs remain elusive, but her real value wasn't measured in numbers. It was measured in hesitation, delay, and the constant awareness that she could appear where the sea suddenly felt very small. Roma? Can you think of a ship built almost too late for the war it was meant to dominate? Roma was elegance hardened into armor, laid down on 18 September 1938, launched in June 1940, and commissioned in June 1942 as fuel shortages already strangled ambition. Her steel hull carried a massive protection scheme, including a 350mm belt and 162mm deck, built for gun duels that rarely came. 9 heavy guns sat in triple turrets, supported by layered anti-aircraft weapons and aircraft facilities, all designed for decisive surface combat. Instead, Roma spent much of her life repositioning and training. Powerful but restrained by logistics and air superiority realities. After Italy's armistice in September 1943, her story ended brutally when German aircraft struck her with guided bombs, sinking her on 9 September. No reliable cost figures survive, which feels fitting. Roma became less a symbol of expense and more a symbol of lost potential sealed beneath the Mediterranean. Zara Albright. This is where Italian naval thinking took a sharp turn. Zara wasn't built to outrun trouble. She was built to survive it. As part of the Zara-class heavy cruisers, alongside Fiume, Gorizia, and Pola, she entered service in the early 1930s with a clear philosophy: trade speed for armor and discipline. Her steel construction emphasized protection uncommon for cruisers carrying 8-inch guns, rejecting the thin-skinned designs Italy had favored before. Zara operated as a fleet-fighting cruiser, screening battleships, covering convoys, and preparing for surface engagements where durability mattered. Her class became infamous during Mediterranean night actions, where radar, confusion, and sudden violence decided outcomes in minutes. While individual costs were never clearly published, the investment was obvious in her build quality. Zara's legacy isn't about one dramatic duel. It's about how quickly surface combat evolved and how even well-protected ships could be overwhelmed when technology and timing shifted against them. Well, let's talk about Luigi di Savoia, Duca degli Abruzzi. Enemy ships run when they see a light cruiser, but this one never behaves lightly. Luigi di Savoia, Duca degli Abruzzi, blended aggression with restraint. Laid down in December 1933, launched in April 1936, and commissioned by December 1937. She carried the heavy light cruiser idea to its limit, pairing 10 152mm guns with stronger protection than earlier Italian designs. At roughly 11,050-ton standard, capable of 34 knots, and able to steam over 4,000 nautical miles at cruising speed, she balanced reach with punch. Her steel hull supported torpedoes, anti-aircraft guns, and float planes, giving her flexibility in chaotic Mediterranean conditions. Major headline battles largely passed her by, yet her real work mattered more: escort duty, fleet presence, and absorbing damage that would have crippled lesser ships. No clean cost figures survive, but her value showed in endurance, proving that survival itself could be a form of victory at sea. Skyray. Imagine something small, moving quietly, not to fight ships head-on, but to slip inside guarded harbors where warships sleep. Ceres was built precisely for that kind of danger. Laid down on 30th of January 1937, launched on 6 January 1938, and completed by 25 March 1938, this Adua-class coastal submarine carried a steel pressure hull shaped for stealth rather than endurance. At first, she followed standard submarine practice, armed with torpedoes and a deck gun. That changed when her role shifted. The deck gun was removed, human torpedo equipment installed, and Ceres became a covert strike platform tied directly to Italy's manned torpedo operations. Her defining moment arrived in December 1941 during the Alexandria raid, when she delivered operators who penetrated harbor defenses and placed charges beneath major British battleships, putting them out of action for lengthy repairs. No reliable cost figures exist. Her story ended on 10 August 1942, sunk after proving that quiet precision could rival brute force. Giulio Cesare picture an old battleship refusing retirement, reshaped to survive a faster, harsher war. Between 1933 and 1937, she underwent a massive rebuild that transformed her into a faster fleet-line battleship, upgrading guns, armor, and speed to keep her relevant. Her steel hull and heavy protection reflected the challenge of forcing a First World War body to endure modern punishment. In service, her job wasn't subtle. She was meant to appear, apply pressure, and prevent convoy lanes from collapsing simply by being present. That role turned real during the Battle of Calabria on 9 July 1940, when she was struck by a long-range shell from HMS Warspite, a hit that helped bring the action to an end. Precise construction or rebuild costs remain unclear, and Italy's records offer little transparency, making accuracy more important than invented numbers in telling her story. Caio Duilio. Caio Duilio began life early, was laid down in February 1912, was launched in April 1913, and was completed in May 1915. Decades later, relevance demanded change. Reconstruction started in 1937 and concluded on 15th of July 1940, reshaping her into a convoy escort bully and fleet support ship. Her steel hull remained, but the rebuild replaced her original main armament with 10 320mm guns while modernizing protection and onboard systems. She wasn't designed to chase constant battles. Her strength lay in presence and pressure. That reality became painfully clear during the night of 11th to 12th of November 1940 at Taranto, when a British torpedo bomber struck her, inflicting serious damage. Months of repairs followed, and the lesson lingered, influencing how Italy handled its battleships afterward. Reliable cost figures were never cleanly published, but Caio Duilio's value was measured in deterrence rather than dramatic victories. Trento speed came first here, and everything else followed. Trento was laid down on 8 February 1925, launched on 4 October 1927, commissioned on 3 April 1929, and lost on 15 June 1942. Built with a steel hull and turbine propulsion, her armor was deliberately modest by heavy cruiser standards, trading protection for velocity. This design fit Italy's speed-first cruiser philosophy, aiming to chase, screen, and strike with 8-inch guns before an enemy could respond properly. Trento moved through many of the Mediterranean's defining moments, operating during Calabria, Cape Spartivento, and the broader movements around Cape Matapan. As the war shifted, convoy warfare turned the sea into a trap, where aircraft and submarines replaced surface duels as the real threat. She ultimately fell victim to that environment. No reliable cost data survives, but her career shows how speed alone couldn't outrun a war that increasingly punished exposure. And now we are moving to Bolzano here. Comes a ship that lived under constant threat, not from battleships, but from everything else. Bolzano was laid down on 11th June 1930, launched on 31st August 1932, completed on 19th August 1933, and finally sunk on 21st June 1944. Built on a steel hull with armor spread across belt, deck, and turrets, she was designed as a high-speed heavy cruiser and used heavily for convoy escort and fleet sweeps. Her work focused on North African supply routes and major fleet movements, including Cape Spartivento and the buildup toward Cape Matapan. In August 1942, a torpedo strike effectively knocked her out of frontline service. Plans to convert her into a hybrid carrier collapsed under resource shortages. After Italy changed sides, Italian and British frogmen sank Bolzano at La Spezia to prevent German use. Clean cost figures never emerged, but her long exposure reflects how dangerous escort duty became in the Mediterranean. Pola power here didn't come from speed, but from discipline layered in steel. Pola entered service as an armored heavy cruiser designed for line-of-battle support and cruiser duels, reflecting how the Zara class valued protection over reckless motion. Commissioned on 21 December 1932, she carried a steel hull reinforced with unusually heavy armor for a cruiser, including thick turret and barbette protection, and even float planes for scouting duties. That confidence met its limit at Cape Matapan. During the battle, an aerial torpedo struck Pola and left her immobilized, turning her into a stationary target rather than a fighting ship. What followed was worse. Attempts to rescue her dragged Zara and Fiume into a night action they were never meant to fight, where British battleships closed in unseen. Pola didn't simply sink on 29 March 1941. She became the circumstance that doomed others. No reliable cost figures survive, but her loss proved armor alone couldn't save a ship once movement was taken away. Fiume. There's a quiet confidence that comes with believing your armor will hold, and Fiume was built around that belief. Laid down on 29 April 1929, launched a year later in April 1930, and commissioned on 23 November 1931, she served as an armored heavy cruiser tasked with fleet screening, convoy cover, and surface combat whenever opportunity allowed. Her steel hull carried thick armor values for a cruiser, especially around turrets and barbettes, and she operated with scouting seaplanes to extend awareness beyond the horizon. Everything unraveled at Cape Matapan. When Pola was disabled, Fiume moved in to assist, unaware of British battleships closing silently through the darkness. Caught at close range on the night of 29 March 1941, she was torn apart before effective reaction was possible. No cost records clearly document her price. But the battle exposed how even heavily protected cruisers could be erased in minutes once surprise replaced preparation. Artilleri's speed, nerve, and obligation defined Artillery long before her end. Built as a frontline destroyer of the Soldati class, she was laid down in 1937, commissioned in 1938, and immediately thrown into escort, interception, and night fighting duties, protecting convoys bound for North Africa. Her steel hull and turbine propulsion favored aggressive maneuvering over armor, while 120mm guns, torpedoes, and anti-aircraft weapons gave her sharp but limited reach. Everything came together during the Battle of Cape Passero, fought in darkness where destroyers lived or vanished quickly. Artillery engaged British light cruisers and managed to damage HMS Ajax before being crippled in return. Left disabled, she survived the night only to be found the next morning and finished off by HMS York on 12 October 1940. Her loss captured the destroyer's reality, standing between convoys and overwhelming firepower, knowing survival was never guaranteed, but movement was never optional. Mass boats. Not everything deadly needed armor or size. Mass boats thrived on the opposite idea. Built as fast attack craft for coastal strike work, these vessels relied on wooden hulls reinforced with lightweight metal fittings, trading protection for raw speed and surprise. Used heavily from 1918 through 1943, their most intense impact came between 1940 and 1942, when Italy leaned into asymmetrical warfare. Their cost was extremely low compared to cruisers or battleships, which made them perfect for a navy constrained by resources. At sea, mass boats specialized in night torpedo raids against Allied shipping, slipping through darkness where larger ships hesitated. They also supported harbor infiltration missions and special forces operations, forcing enemies to defend even supposedly secure ports. Their effect went beyond sinkings. By demanding constant vigilance, MAS boats stretched Allied defenses thin across wide areas. They proved Italy didn't rely only on capital ships. Sometimes cheap speed created the loudest fear. Leonardo da Vinci distance was the weapon here, not visibility. Leonardo da Vinci was built as a long-range, ocean-going attack submarine meant to take Italy's war far beyond the Mediterranean. Laid down on 18 September 1939, launched exactly a year later, and commissioned on 17 January 1941, she carried a steel pressure hull designed for endurance, with greater fuel capacity than most Italian submarines. Armed with torpedoes, a deck gun, and anti-aircraft weapons, she was configured for prolonged independent patrols. Operating from Bordeaux with Beta Zoom, Leonardo da Vinci hunted merchant convoys and isolated ships across the Atlantic, far from friendly support. The results were unmatched. She became Italy's most successful submarine of World War II, sinking over 120,000 tons of Allied shipping before being hunted down and sunk by Allied anti-submarine forces on 23 May 1943. While battleships waited for fuel and cover, she quietly delivered results measured in loss, not spectacle. And that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Now, like the video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for future updates. Thanks for watching and giving us your valuable time.